here. What's up, guys? Happy NFL opening day. Tonight is the night we've been waiting for. A little bit of taste of the NFL season to come. I'm excited. I hope you guys are excited. In this video, we're going to break down some of my favorite single game picks and plays for both FanDuel and especially DraftKings via the Showdown mode. If you guys are going to jump in those modes, maybe I can help you guys talk through a couple plays, yay or nays. It's okay to disagree with me if you do or don't. Let me know in the comments below. The best way to show a little support to me is really just to interact with any of the content on the channel. So do me a solid, hit that thumbs up, leave a comment below, and let's talk about tonight's game of football. It feels so good to say that. The Super Bowl champion Tampa Bay Buccaneers opened the season on primetime television against the Dallas Cowboys, and they currently sit as an 8-point favorite. Tampa Bay owns an incredible defense that last year was number one at stopping the run for the second consecutive year, allowing under 83 rushing yards per game, funneling opposing teams to throw the ball. And this defense looks mostly the same, but they added defensive tackle Vita Vea and linebacker Joe Tryon, so arguably they got better. Both that fact and the 8-point spread here suggest we will see just how well recovered Dak Prescott is after his gruesome injury last year. And before injury, Prescott was putting up mind-blowing numbers, averaging over 30 DraftKings fantasy points per game in his 5 starts, throwing for almost 370 yards per game. I do think what gets lost in the adoration of those numbers is really the urgency he was forced to play in. He was playing his butt off to compensate for what many consider was the worst defense in all of football. The Buccaneers are implied for 30 points, and they have probably the most frustratingly spread out, balanced offense in all of football. And this creates one of the trickiest one-game slates I've seen in a while. But between you and me, I miss football. This is really a great exercise to remind us how to approach game theory, game script, and kind of decide where good chalk lies, where good leverage lies, and kind of play the numbers there. So I'm excited to kind of jump into it. Before we do get into my picks for tonight, I want to let you guys know that my personal player projections for this Showdown slate, as well as every NFL slate for DraftKings and FanDuel, are available at rundfs.com. If you go to rundfs.com, click VIP memberships, you'll see a couple of options. Find what's right for you, and you'll be able to unlock the baseball spreadsheet, the NFL spreadsheet, NBA's next month, and then what's perhaps most valuable, in my opinion, is getting into that rundfs.com VIP Discord and hang out with the crew around the clock, talking strategy, plays, and then especially jump into those pre-lock voice chats. And hopefully you guys will join us. And if you don't want to grab a mic and join the conversation, you can at least listen in or just participate in text chat. But there's plenty of avenues there to submerge yourself in a winning community. In this community, they get it done. My favorite flag to wave is in December of last year, All In Finn, Always Be Placing, took down the Millie Maker for NFL, and he did it again this year in golf, but we don't need to talk about that in this video. But we have some solidified, established winners there. You can be balling on a budget, grinding the single entries, quarter arcades, no matter what. There's no egos in that Discord, but we do have some guys that will help you grow as players. So come be part of that. We'd love to have you. Let's talk about tonight's game. Taking a look at the final injury report from practice yesterday, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers list free safety Jordan Whitehead out, and the Dallas Cowboys, as we've known pretty much all week, will be without their best offensive lineman, Zach Martin. There was question earlier this week about the possibility of Giovanni Bernard missing this game. He was a full participant yesterday in practice, so he should be good to go, and great. That makes that running back committee for Tampa Bay even more but that's the injury report. Let's talk about the picks. I like to process everyone available and kind of tier them in a quasi-ranking system. If you guys have been following me for basketball, for baseball, you know I do this daily in the spreadsheet when presenting my player pool. I figured it would be a good aesthetic exercise to kind of do it here and be a little bit different. So I'm going to tier players that are projected to accrue points in my model today based on a 1 through 5. 1 being my favorite plays on the slate and likely my highest owned captains. 2 being my highest owned raw point guys that maybe don't get that captain spot much. 3 being the risky floor but worth the ceiling guys. 4, I don't love it but I'm going to have some. And 5 being, I think I'll just full fade it. It's pretty simple. Let's get cracking. Let's talk about the guy that is the guy, right? Tom Brady. We'll go ahead and list him as one of my favorite captains and favorite plays on the slate. He's going to get a chance at a primetime television statement game against this putrid Dallas Cowboys defense and run Bruce Arians' offense that threw 60% of plays last season, potentially cashing in on 3 to 4 implied touchdowns with the Bucs implied for 30 points. I normally don't like playing quarterbacks in the captain spot. Generally, I'm privy to a high volume running back or a high volume receiver to hit the end zone twice, maybe get me that yardage bonus. But as I said, the Bucs offense is pretty spread out. And even with the Bucs scoring 4 touchdowns, it's beyond reasonable to project that no one other than Tom Brady is connected to more than one of those touchdowns. So for this game, I'm willing to bend my quarterback into captain exposure a little bit more than usual and look for Brady to shine in prime time. And right now, he's actually projected to be my highest owned captain on the slate. Next guy I'm going to put here in the tier 1 for me, it's going to be Chris Godwin. I don't like to get too diluted at the captain spot. For this exercise, I'm really kind of thinking what I would do in my 20 lineups tonight, the 20 entry maxes. So with that in mind, I don't want to get too diluted at the captain spot in those 20 lineups. I do typically like to settle on 4 or 5 captains. And at this spot, I was kind of wrestling between Godwin and Mike Evans, and my decision was almost a snap call. I'm going Chris Godwin. Tom Brady, he loves throwing his slot receivers footballs. We've seen that in anywhere he's thrown footballs at in New England. We've definitely seen Julian Edelman become a household name, and Chris Godwin is potentially one of the most explosive slot receivers in all of football when he's healthy. In Tampa's last preseason game, Tom Brady played 18 snaps. Godwin was on the field for 17 of those snaps, most of any receiver in the receiving core there, and he lined up in the slot for 13 of those snaps. He sets up to continue his over 50% route running out of the slot rate that we saw last year. And when he was healthy, he was Tom Brady's favorite target. Chris Godwin created 7 receptions of over 20 yards out of the slot last season. That was the 3rd most in all of football. So against this poor defense, it's not unlike Chris Godwin to break one for a long home run. And if I'm playing a receiver in the captain spot, I'm hoping that there's a chance that they're the highest scoring player on the entire slate. So what I'm really looking for Godwin here is hopefully a 100-yard bonus, but hopefully at least 1 touchdown. But 2 would be great. And speaking of 2 would be great, let's talk about my next guy that I'm going to have a little bit less of in a captain spot, but I think he's too cheap, and he does allow some big boy, raw point, raw volume lineups. That's going to be Antonio Brown. We're staying on the Bucs side here. I think the price point on Antonio Brown is really what's most alluring here. Game to game, I might expect AB's median projection to be deviated less than 3 to 5 DraftKings points from Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, and there will be games where AB leads all of Brady's pass catchers in DraftKings points. His target share pushed over 20% once he settled in on this offense last season, and he's looked pretty sharp in training camp, and if he happens to pull one of those Bucs implied touchdowns, he'll set us up for greatness, and if he pulls in 2 of them, it's a nutty spot. So when I'm putting all the Tom Brady pass catchers on the slate, I'm kind of saying that I think Chris Godwin or Antonio Brown have the highest chance of being the highest beneficiary of multiple, at least 1, but maybe multiple touchdowns. So those are my 3 favorite Bucs captain spots. Now let's talk about my favorite Cowboy captain player. It's maybe not who you think it is. My projections right now show Dak Prescott and Ezekiel Elliott as the highest owned Cowboys and the highest owned Cowboy captains. But I'm going to go to CeeDee Lamb. How about that? The best matchup for the Cowboys players, considering the game script here, road dogs, and the fact that they're pretty solid at shutting down the run, belongs to CeeDee Lamb. He's going to likely draw the defensive stylings of Sean Murphy Bunting, the worst corner, perhaps the worst player on the Bucs defense, and run a lot of routes out of the slot. And I do like the slot as a kind of a safety net for quarterbacks who might be experiencing a lot of rush. We talked about Zach Martin being out and just needing to play at a high pace and get some of those chunk yardage gains. And CeeDee Lamb could rack that up. We might expect Dak to take what's there because of that and feed CeeDee Lamb some PPR goodness. 8 players come in price higher than CeeDee Lamb on this showdown slate for DraftKings, and he's my second favorite points per dollar option because of that. Last year, CeeDee Lamb led all of football in 20-plus yard receptions out of the slot. Talked about that stat for Chris Godwin. So when I am leaning towards some Cowboys in the captain spot, for me, it's going to be CeeDee Lamb, and I know that's kind of one of the ways I'm getting pretty different versus the field. Moving on to my tier 2 highest owned flex guys, but probably not going to catch that captain spot for me in 20 or less lineups. Again, this is not saying you can't hunt me down in a 150 and catch these guys in the captain spot, but when I'm consolidating my efforts to 20 lineups or less, these guys will probably be guys that I have heavy exposure to, but it's more so in the flex, not in the captain spot. The first guy kind of fitting that bill for me is Ezekiel Elliott. The rushing matchup isn't great for Ezekiel Elliott here, but he will never be game scripted out of usage, really no matter what the scoreboard is, as we've seen him evolve as a pass catcher in this offense. And while I think there's enough pushback to keep his slate-breaking ceiling low, and that's why I don't have him in the captain spot in 20 or less lineups, I really can't let go of the volume he'll offer and the potential raw points, right? Value is extremely subjective on these showdown slates. You really just want the guys that have the most opportunities, and I think Ezekiel Elliott should lead the Cowboys in opportunities, probably 20-25 touches, hopefully more in the side of targets. I can't let go of that volume. I can't let go of the potential raw points. He's a pass interference call at the 1-yard line from a rushing touchdown, and in a hurry-up offense, he could be peppered with checkdowns to accrue fantasy points. So I'm not going to not play Ezekiel Elliott today, but I do think one of the ways I'm getting a little bit different is I might play him exclusively in the flex spot in those 20 lineups, and right now I got him projected out of the captain spot for about 13%. So a little bit of being a little different versus the field in that regard. Amari Cooper's averaging over 8 targets per game with Dak Prescott under center for an average of 14 yards a catch and linking up on 15 touchdowns. If you game script the Cowboys to struggle running and rely on throwing the ball more, that would increase target opportunities for Amari Cooper, so I'm game theorying him into my tier 2 listing here. Obviously, I'd love him to hit the end zone for a touchdown. I don't really expect him to break the slate out of the captain spot, so I'm going to keep my exposure to him at a liberal rate in my tier 2 spot for 20 or less. Moving on to the tier 3 spot. This is probably the biggest leverage spot for me in terms of being different than the field. Dak Prescott. I think this is where I'm going to be different from the field. Right now I have Dak projected to be the second highest owned player on the slate at both the flex and captain spot. And I think there's enough uncertainty clouded over him to leverage that in my personal ownership versus the field. Not saying I don't project him well, but at some point lineup construction on a slate that, or a game format, a game mode, single game mode that often leads to a lot of duplicate lineups. And first, I got to get a little different. And I think Dak Prescott is the highest owned guy that I can argue against, right? The Cowboys are going to be without their best offensive lineman against the Bucs, a team that racked up the 5th most sacks in the league last year, and they hawked 15 interceptions in 16 games. Dak's overcoming a gruesome ankle injury and a lesser discussed shoulder injury, and I'm willing to parlay those two factors and me being opposite the field for leverage versus a top 5 defense on the road. The only reason I'm not getting completely rid of him is because he's still going to have enough volume to where his raw point, if it breaks 10, 15 fantasy points, might still be enough to want exposure to in this slate. Another guy in this tier 3 area for me, talk about Mike Evans. I'm pushing Evans to tier 3 simply by process of elimination. I like Chris Godwin more. I like Antonio Brown more. And Mike Evans has been pretty volatile as a fantasy scorer in the last few seasons, week to week. This is a balanced offense. He's the most expensive pass catcher that Brady has. So he kind of has to do that much more to kind of stand out and be worth it. So in this game script where we project the Bucs to play from a lead, a pretty liberal lead, I don't really see a lot of need for Mike Evans to jump ball a touchdown or something like that. So while that possibility still exists, I feel like it's one of the lesser likely scenarios. And for that reason, I'm going to be very light on Mike Evans in the scheme of this slate. And then lastly, just kind of scatterbraining the rest of the field here. This is the main guys I wanted to make strong decisions on, but scatterbraining the rest of the field. When it comes to kicker, I don't hate having some exposure to kickers. Sometimes in the lower scoring games, I'll even get crazy enough to like captain a kicker. I don't think I'm going to do that here. I think Greg Zuerlein, at some point, the Cowboys feel like they're going to have to take chances and score touchdowns. So I'm going to put Zuerlein as a tier 4 me and kind of cap him at a pretty pinpoint ownership exposure, meaning like probably 10%, 15%. I do think I'm willing to have a little bit more of the Bucs kicker here, Ryan Suckup. So I might put him as a tier 3 kind of stocking stuffer guy, but I'm not going to get too egregious there. I'm going to have no Cowboys defense. We're going to put him in a tier 5, the no thank you level. Dalton Schultz versus Blake Jarwin. More than likely, I don't think I'm going to prioritize either one of them and even care if they make any of my lineups, but if they did, I don't want them in the same lineup, so if I'll probably for sure make that rule. But right now, I think Blake Jarwin and Dalton Schultz can sit on the sideline for me. Giovanni Bernard, it's kind of a third down pass catching back, and when you think about what a third down pass catching back is used for, it's usually for a team that's in a neutral game script, needs a first down, or playing from behind. I don't really see that game script here for me for the Bucs, but one of the things he does have going for him here is he's only 2K on DraftKings, so I'm not going to have none of him, and a couple of receptions out of the backfield for him, like we've seen Brady used James White for in the past. He does have a chance to break one, maybe 3 receptions, 50 yards, 8 fantasy points is enough to serve a purpose at 2K as a tier 4. So I'm going to have a little bit of Bernard, but not a ton. Gronkowski, kind of the same thing. He's not a guy I expect to get a lot of snaps between the 20s, but would be a red zone target for Tom Brady when they get down there. Again, these narrative primetime statement games, I could see that becoming a factor. O.J. Howard's probably going to outshine Cameron Brate. I'm less inclined to look his way. I'm somewhere between the 4 and 5 right now. I'm going to put him at 5, same with Cameron Brate. Ronald Jones and Leonard Fournette. These are 2 names that I'm going to wrestle with throughout the day. The reason being is in game scripting 101 for the fantasy DFS school, right? A team that plays with a more than 1 possession lead typically leans on the run game, right? They're going to run the ball, they're going to milk the clock, and they're going to go home. And that's what makes the Buccaneers so frustrating here, because they have such a split backfield. So it puts you in a position where the concept of game theory and game scripting means or pushes you to not ignore that fact, and you want some. So I do think I'm going to lean toward Ronald Jones a little bit more than Leonard Fournette, but it's not like I'm feeling great about that. So I'm going to put Jones in the tier 4, and I might even end up putting Leonard Fournette in the tier 4 me as well. But for now, I'm going to put Fournette in the 5. But those are guys that I'm going to want some loose exposure to, because they could vulture those goal line touchdowns. They could thrive from a second half lead, rack up 50, 60 yards, 70 yards, and maybe one of them breaks one and breaks the slate. So because of positive game script, I can't ignore them. Whereas on a bigger slate, I wouldn't even give myself the headache here. But in a 1-game scenario, there's going to be positive game script for them. Bucs defense, I'm willing to put the Bucs defense in the tier 4 for me because the Cowboys are without Zach Martin, because they are game scripted into playing from behind, because last year they had 15 interceptions. They had top 5 amount of sacks per game. I think there's a real shot for a scoop and score, and they could really limit Dak Prescott and the Cowboys offense. I'm not going to have any Cowboys defense. That's why I put them in the tier 5. Michael Gallup, I'm also going to put him in the tier 4. I wouldn't hate the idea of him going up a little bit more as I get into 100, 150 lineups, but for now I'm going to put him as tier 4 for me. Same with Scotty Miller. I think he can see the field for 10 or less snaps, which might be enough for him to PPR his way into filling out a hole at the bottom end. If he really got lucky and caught you a volatile touchdown, he would probably find himself in a winning lineup, so I don't want none. And then Tony Pollard, I think he is somebody that could spell Ezekiel Elliott a decent enough chunk. Like, could there be an 80%, 20% share here? Could this game get completely away from the Cowboys in the fourth quarter and they lean on Pollard over Zeke, and Pollard in a hurry-up offense gets some receptions? I think that's a real range of outcome here. So I'm going to start him as a 4, using that mind in that process. Later in the day, I could wrestle with even move him up a little bit more, because it's not really breaking the bank. If I look at my single game projections, Control F, Tony Pollard. Pollard is 4,200 on DraftKings out of the flex spot. So I like that would be a solid salary savings, and it's right there around a kicker spot, right? So if I wanted to maybe get a little different than people who might be a little bit more prone to playing a kicker at that price point, the Ryan Suckup on a team, implied to score 30 points, maybe Pollard does get 3 to 5 targets in a positive game script in the fourth quarter. It would be a deep sweat towards the end there, but it's definitely a viable range of outcomes. So I wouldn't have none of Pollard, but it's definitely not something that we can process as a safe floor shot. So there's my tiers. That's what I'm going to do from where I'm sitting now this morning for tonight's Showdown Slate. You guys let me know what you're thinking about this slate. Do you disagree with any of my tiers? Let me know in the comments below. I won't get offended, I promise. And if you guys want to hang out with me tonight before lock, go to rundfs.com. Get yourself a VIP membership. It's going to be a lot of fun, man. I'm going to be watching some baseball throughout the day, but I'm definitely going to be watching some football tonight. I'm really excited for football to be back. And then, of course, we have coverage for football this Sunday, and it's going to be a long, glorious season, and it's the most wonderful time of the year. Basketball next month. Guys, I appreciate you. Hit that thumbs up for me. Show me some love. If you're not subscribed, welcome to the channel. Hit that subscribe button, and I promise you're going to enjoy the content throughout all of the sports seasons. Twitter.com/Gundacker. If you got anything else for me, my DMs are open. I'll see you guys next time. I love you guys. Good luck. God bless. And go win some money.